good evening, whenever you're joining us. Well, good for joining us and greetings. My name is Rhodes Pierre. I am your host of We the People, as in the French version of Yes the People, and I am here with awesome guest, the gentleman that is like again. We're actually let me celebrate by saying Happy Fourth of July. We're taping on Fourth of July, so let's commemorate the fact that hey, this the nation is celebrating its birthday, and it's a bittersweet kind of thing. But I could think of no better guest to have on today because of speaking of like freedom, liberation, and media. The gentleman that we have on with us today is by the name of Patrick Wilson of Activate Media. Patrick, it's an honor and a privilege to have you here, and like you do great work as far as like highlighting different voices. Can you explain to the people what Activate Media is, how it got started, and who you are? Introduce yourself. Thank you.
Well, I'm Patrick Wilson, and thank you for having me on the show. I run what is called Activate Media. The origin of Activate Media is actually Occupy Boston Radio. This was started out of a working group in the encampment, and weirdly enough, our first broadcasting day was on the actual day that the encampment was evicted. So it's an easy day to remember. But with that, what it's grown to, and the reason it's changed is that with I don't want to say the dwindling of Occupy because all the people, most of them, are still involved with activism in one way or another, one cause or another. And that was one of the cool things about Occupy is it brought all these different groups of people with different things together under one banner. Now, since that time, obviously things have dwindled a bit. So we wanted to change the name to something that would be able to represent more groups and more struggles out there in the world. So we changed it to Activate Media, and it encompasses Activate Magazine as well as Activate Radio, which is where the actually very similar broadcasting is happening. It's a combination of international, national, and local podcasts and radio shows that are brought to light in order to both put a spotlight on the marginalized groups as well as different groups that are involved with different struggles through protest or local organizations that are nonprofits that are working for things politically or otherwise within the community. The idea is that we produce a certain amount of shows. We combine the nationally syndicated shows with shows from people that are beginning or getting started, and hopefully that gives everybody a little bit larger platform. And what it also does, as we see protests erupt in different parts of the world and different parts of the country, is it allows for an opportunity of those voices on the ground actually to be directly broadcast to people in a timely manner so that somebody in Boston can hear directly from people on the street what's happening in Oakland or maybe in Chicago, and people can, I guess, do their actions or what have you in solidarity. Um, they can sync up and do things that way. So anyway, there's a lot of different things with regard to what Activate Media is and what it does. I just hope that it does something as far as making a difference in this world and creating a little bit better circumstances.
Oh, nice. So, what are some of the voices, the marginalized voices that you kind of like highlight through your platform? Um, and then, like again, like you said, these people are people that haven't heard or not. So, can you give us an example or a sample of what people, the kind of groups that you have on on your platform?
Well, some of the examples I can give you historically have been, of course, during the Occupy time period. There were still protests that went on for maybe a good year, three quarters of a year, something like that. Afterward, shortly thereafter, when Occupy was sort of dwindling down, is when the thing with Trayvon Martin happened. So there was a kind of a shift at that point that happened into what ended up becoming Black Lives Matter. And time after time after time after time after time again, we find ourselves in this same spot where we're mourning after some horrible thing that happened. So this has been a constant over a bunch of years. There have also been some other things that have gone on over the course of a bunch of years. Things like the gun violence in our country. I mean, I knock on wood when I say that we haven't had a mass shooting lately, and in the circumstances that we're in today with July 4th and the divide that exists in our country between people. I hope and I pray that that doesn't happen. So I'm knocking on wood on that one, that everybody stays safe. Um, the other groups of people that have been represented here are LGBT people. We've had several shows from that perspective. There have been shows on Activate Radio and Occupy Boston Radio during the time before we had a casino here. Was a group of people that were following the legalization of gambling. I've broadcast Mike Can's show for a good number of years, The Young Jerks, and before that, Two Potheads on Cannabis, I think it was called at one point, and there were several variations of that show that I've broadcast. So the marijuana legalization has been represented throughout. There's a lot of different things as far as reporting on different things. The struggle with the Boston Policemen's Association, the BPPA, the original struggle a bunch of years ago with the newspaper when it was found out that some of their officers in their union and in their union newspaper were publishing racist things and some pretty derogatory and untoward things that shouldn't be in print even. When that was happening, we were involved with that. Um,
I see that story I've never heard of. Like, and again, like I last night, it was funny. I was actually on another podcast defending the exemplary record of the Boston Police Department, and here you are telling me like, no, they have, again, there's
there's
always
a
going to be
lot of
there's
things.
always going to be like a few bad apples in the batch, as they say. But yeah, I did not know, like, because again, I was like, we never had a riot in the Boston. We, you know what I mean? Like, we've never had like a shooting where it led to mass protests like directly in the city. So that's, again, I was
I think,
basing that upon that, but I did not realize like there were internal struggles with the department doing
well, there are
dealing with
different
people.
there are different aspects of the Boston Police Department that are important. I mean, you mentioned Mamleo a little bit ago. We broadcast Mamleos around the table every Sunday morning, and that's a very interesting show because it comes from Boston Praise TV or Radio and TV,
Oh, can
and
you actually tell people again what Mamleo is? A lot of people might be like, "Oh, what you just mentioned it. What is that?"
MAMLIO, it stands for Massachusetts Association of Minority Law Enforcement Officers.
Yep, yep. Okay.
You know, and that's it's one of the best shows I think that we have because it presents two different subjects on it. It presents a social justice aspect of what's happening in the town because uh, the both the police officers and people who aren't police officers, faith leaders in the community and whatnot, are all affected by what happens in the community, and they bring both activist leaders as well as police officers as well as faith leaders all together for very substantive, productive conversations about the different events that have gone on in Boston around its politics, racial issues. It's one of my favorite shows.
No,
But no, they do great work over there, and they that we broadcast that on Sunday mornings. They do that on Saturday mornings. What I do is I record it and I rebroadcast it on Activate Radio.
nice, nice. That's awesome. No, and then the thing that I liked about what you said was the fact that you connect groups locally and nationally. So the idea of like think locally but act globally, or whatever, think globally but act locally, kind of that philosophy. I feel like that Activate Media and kind of like embodies or becomes the epitome of that.
I think that if you think about things in more of a tactical manner, just in very simple terms, The transference of information from city to city, town to town, amongst different groups that are all kind of working towards the same direction is a very important thing, and that's something that's never existed. Um, I'm not trying to. I guess I'm not trying to get into left-right politics here and what each one may espouse or what have you. But I would like to point out that the folks on the right have AM radio. They have a lot of different media kind of nailed down tight, and they've got a very dedicated group of people that follow that, and it's a tool for organizing for them as well because
Absolutely.
it kind of gets people on the same page
Yes,
as they're
absolutely.
as they're addressing different issues and stuff. Now, whether you or I agree with what they're espousing from their perspective, it is their perspective, and they do get it out kind of effectively that way.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
on the left, there's never really been. I mean, there's been attempts at it. Large money attempts at trying to do a similar thing. I mean, Air America existed a bunch of years ago, and I was personally a fan of that.
What is
But
it called again?
it was called Air America. It had
Oh yeah.
a lot of think tank types, a lot of really good people, and people that were comedians, people that were
Yes. Robin
really
Williams was on it. Yeah, I remember.
absolutely. I mean, there were a lot of good people on there. That's because I happen to follow the left side of politics a little bit more than the right.
Yeah.
So to me, that was a sort of an affinity thing. And for
Right.
me, the thing to be able to tune into some kind of a radio station of some kind somewhere and to be able to passively listen to something that maybe fit my perspective a little bit better.
Yeah.
And I
Okay.
don't believe, since they financially didn't end up working out, their business model was a more typical commercial radio business model.
Okay.
And with that business model, it's very, very expensive. And they had great talent and everything, and I loved what they were doing. But the business model over the years has changed,
Yeah.
has
Absolutely.
had to change, and that's aided by the benefit of technology as we've
Hmm.
gone along as well. But I think that there's always been a great opportunity for for a lot of different groups that have different affinities for one another to be able to work on areas that they do have solidarity and move forward together. And this is a tool to be able to hopefully unite not only just activists uh, from all over in their different causes, but also to unite different kinds of people, because one of the other focuses that we have at Activate Media and Activate Radio is the arts. Now, the arts community is something that people work in, either part time or full time in many capacities, and there's not a lot of money in it, and it's been hit kind of harshly by the coronavirus and everything that's happened. These people are also activists, but some of them may be more passive activists because they're the folks that are home and they're working on their craft, which oftentimes, we do see a reflection of what the times that we're living in through their songs and their art. I think that they are a very important part of the activist community. And moving forward, as far as what they can put into it, as well as being a larger community and what they can receive from having, like, not communion but community with the larger group that's also living with the same, I guess, gripes and problems that everybody else is.
Oh man, like it's kind of funny how you touched upon music, and like last night, I was watching either The Blood or something on Netflix, and it was a new Spike Lee movie about the Black experience in Vietnam, and it kind
Mhm.
of correlated like how music was involved, like all the protest songs that they had in the '60s, and like especially the songs like Marvin Gaye had, brother, brother. There are too many of you guys dying. You know what I mean? And like
Right on.
war is not the answer. You know what I mean? Because again, it was just kind of like it's so many protest songs are out there and just kind of deliberately talking to the power and saying something. And it's like as you said, the artists have always been there with the people, like with their
Well,
message, kind of like being there for
mhm.
representing the voice of the people, not the corporations.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you're a comedian, right?
Yes, yes. Well,
Okay.
I
In
play
in
one.
in
I
your
play
art.
one at the clubs. I pretend to be one at the clubs. You know what
Okay,
I'm
okay,
saying?
okay, okay, okay. You're one of the cool kids.
Well, the thing is,
Um,
like, I don't get paid for it yet. You know what I'm saying? Ain't like I don't think that these signing checks ain't comedian.
all right, all right. Well, let me ask you this though. When you write your material,
Yes,
what's it based upon?
reality.
It's what you see, isn't it?
Yeah. So I'm an artist. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna paint what I know. I'm gonna joke what I know. I'm gonna sing what I know.
Right, but it's social commentary about what you see from your perspective is what it
Yes,
is.
yes,
And I think that no matter whether it's written or spoken or or played in an instrument, I think that all of those different forms have an amazing way to be able to conduct something from one person to another about their experience.
absolutely.
That's why I think that art's such an important part of all this. Plus the fact that, let's be honest, we all go through a lot of stress, and you know, a little healing that comes from
Hmm.
music and being able to laugh a little bit
Yes.
is an important part of all this. Because how much time do we all spend as activists being serious and going rah 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 and this and that? And I mean, wow. Remember,
I think the only reason that we're activists is because the thing, like we're actually fed up. Because no one really wants to go out and protest. People are just kind of like, all right, I'd rather just be home chilling, not doing anything, playing video game, whatever, just doing anything, like just enjoying myself. And the only
right?
reason people are protesting is they are actually fed up. Like they're like, okay, this is it. This is not no longer. I can no longer get kind of just stand by and say, okay, this is okay for me to live with and for society, because let's face it, like people exercise. They don't do things like like we don't do the right things unless we're forced to. It's
Well,
like
okay,
you know what
okay.
I mean.
You're talking about the motivations, what it takes to get somebody out in the street to actually be
Yes.
able to do something, and how we go from sitting behind the PS4 or
Mm-hmm.
watching Netflix to actually putting pants on and leaving the house and doing
Making
something.
signs and go like I love like thank you for all
Yeah.
the protesters. Thank you for all the
Well,
people out there. That's I like to say that as well every time
I
I
I
do the
think that
show.
I think that every I don't know, man. I mean, maybe it's every 10 years or so, or every generation once or maybe a second time. It seems to me that if you go back through history, there's always some kind of a struggle. I mean, we all rise and we go into the streets and we do things that are, that make people scared because they're like, oh my God, this is out of control. I mean, Watts, Detroit, these things from, generations previous. These things scared white America like you wouldn't believe. And oh my God, these people, all the
Yeah, but
preconceived
it's
notions.
funny how those things scared white America, but yet the burning of like the Tulsa, the Black Wall Street, Oklahoma,
Right?
like the mass destruction of like hey the different black neighborhoods like Rosewood,
Mhm.
it didn't like that didn't scare them. Like the seeing the mass lynchings of a bunch of black people hanging off trees, that
Because
didn't
it
scare them.
because when you objectivize people, and what I mean by objectivizing them is making them not human in your mind. You may not think about of them of physically making them not human, but it's kind of like how people don't really look at somebody when they do something nasty to them or they're going to be mean to them because they don't want to accept the acknowledgement that that's a human being that you're doing something to. And they think that if it doesn't have a human face to it, or if it doesn't have some sort of a, I guess, a conscience, sort of a aspect of coming back on them some way or making them accountable for their actions, then it seems a little bit more, it's easier for somebody to do something that might be in their mind that's nasty if nobody's going to know about it. And I think that a lot of our society does that in times when that opportunity brings itself up, and that's where you have a lot of misconceived notions that create a person's psyche around different things, their fears, their different things. All of these things play in, and it makes people react to situations. Whether it be a person who's doesn't know what else to do and they don't know of anything else that's going to make anything happen but to break a window and maybe burn down a building because 20 years ago or maybe 50 years ago people reacted to that. Well, what else do you got left? So I kind of get that in a way. I'm not saying that we should burn everything, burn down our communities and hurt other people. But I'm saying that that's a voice of desperation.
Yes.
And I'm also saying that, and I'm not justifying, and there's a double-edged sword there with what
Hmm.
I was. Um, on the other side of that, I believe that there are many people that have guilt for their actions because they do objectify other people. They don't have a personal relationship with them. And I think it changes a lot of people's minds when, like, for example, if somebody's racist, if their child dates a person from another race, then that forces them to reckon with that issue one way or another because they've got to deal with their child and their love for their child. The same goes for the LGBT community. For a person who is LGBT and comes out to their family, the great fear that the only thing that last thing that they have to depend upon in this world is going to reject them and whatnot around that. So I mean, there are a lot of things around this where you get emotions involved, and I just think we're living in a time where if we have the ability to outreach to more people, to have more conversations that sometimes aren't comfortable, but if you can get people to listen for 2 seconds and maybe hear one inkling of one sentence that might make sense to them, that might make them listen or interact in an honest fashion. And I think that something's been accomplished there.
No, that's a really good point that you make right there. Is the fact that just to have the conversation, just to have the dialogue, and sometimes just being recognized, or being someone be able to say, "Hey, okay, I see your perspective." That's sometimes it was needed. And to kind of harp upon your point about the people rioting and destroying properties, like Martin Luther King said, riots are the voice of the people that are not heard. You know what I mean? So that's why they go out there and do that. That's what manifests if they can't be heard and stuff. And the whole thing about like the destruction of property is like, oh, why destroying property? This so good. And the thing is, it's like to kind of highlight the fact that um, insurance companies, corporate America, give more focus on the broken glass and window than the death of the actual person that caused the death of the window. They're like more concerned about the broken glass than they are about the dead person. So that's kind of the juxtaposition of like, okay, I'm not justifying the rioting. I'm not justifying the property, but I think it's to highlight the idea of like, and again, I don't know if that's what they're trying to do, but I thought of like, why would you destroy property? What's the whole point of it? And I'm not justifying looting or anything like that because it's like, hey, the people worked hard to make the stuff, So, but the
Well,
idea is like, again,
I,
the
I I think
police.
I think that you got to clarify with that it's there are a lot of questions about looting and rioting with the
Mm-hmm,
damage that happens. I mean, there's a couple different directions you can go with that, and one is directly when it's going on. There are people who instigate things like that, who
mm-hmm,
show up
mm-hmm,
from the other side in
mm-hmm.
order to break those windows. And
Yes,
some of us have seen the
yes.
videos and stuff. And we know that as far as a PR perspective, because perception is everything in this
Mm-hmm,
world and we live on that, that there's a certain segment of our population that's only going to see one thing.
mm-hmm.
And it will be played out a certain way to them. And for political purposes, that's the manipulations being done on the hearts and minds of America.
But the good
Um,
thing I would say is because of all the cell phone videos, there were people that you actually saw telling people not to do this, to stop it, and why are you doing this? Like, why are you come? You're not here for because people were spraying BML and they weren't really part of the movement. They were just there, as you said, to kind of like hijack or take the narrative of the movement. Is that what
there's
you're
another
saying?
Yes, that's on the one side of that, that is exactly what I'm saying. And the other point that I would like to make with regard to that is it affects things in a larger way economically. And you have to look at city planning, at the way that urban development has traditionally been done and is done in both Boston and around the country. You mentioned a couple of things. What made me think of that was you mentioned broken windows, and that
Mm-hmm.
comes with blight as well.
Yes,
And
yes.
when we have things like this happen, somebody comes through and like you and I were talking about a second ago, with the direct instigation of these things, because
Mm-hmm.
people follow. Sometimes when they see something happen, they're out of desperate means and don't know what to do. That's how you get 30 people doing something that maybe one started it that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't even involved with any of it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Because people do follow the leader. But on the other side of that, there's somebody who profits in a huge way, and we never think about this. That's the developers. So, say for example, an area gets all burned down and everything. Now, you're talking about the insurance aspect. Yeah, some people are going to get paid off in their insurance, and for them, that may create some simple justice for their generation. But unfortunately, in the larger sense of things, when you have city planning, when you have an area that's gone, that's been damaged to that level, there's a lot of money that wants to come in from development. Now, that's where we start talking about how many affordable housing units we have, the parking that we have, the public transportation access we have, the affordability of apartments, and this is how somebody is able to come in with developments and have $3,000, $4,000 apartments that none of us can afford to live in anymore. So what they've effectively done is eradicated all the people that they didn't want there anyway, got them out, and they're going to build something brand new and
Yeah,
beautiful.
it's economic warfare. One way or another. It's like it's still kind of like we can't legally say, hey, whatever, we don't want blacks or whatever brown people here. We'll just say, hey, y'all can't afford to live as we set the things up that way.
They don't get you one way, they'll get you another
Another
way.
way, yes. So it's
Yeah,
like the power
that's
of
always the way
status
it's been.
quo. You know,
I mean, that,
yeah,
that even leads into the statues. Look at Mount Rushmore. Look what it overlooks. Look who it is.
yeah.
That's them saying that, well, maybe the Lakota tribe has this land, and that's cool and everything. You got this little piece, but we didn't get it all. We're not so happy about this. So we're going to remind you of everything else that we did to everybody in order to eradicate the indigenous people from this land and take it over. Going to have a
Yeah.
constant reminder of this patriotic image over your head. And how dare you call it, anything and be called unpatriotic for doing that? I mean, how many of us in this country knew that Mount Rushmore was a racist sort of a thing, or that it had any other connotations before this year?
Well, exactly. Like you're schooling me right now because I'm like I know where it was built in on those mountains, and it was like again, like I know it was. Wow, no, I do not know the history of Mount Rushmore the way, like again, like the way they
Oh,
probably stole the land and they said, okay,
yeah.
like we're gonna screw you guys over anyway because we took over the country. Whatever
Yeah.
you had here, move over there. And we don't care if you die. Whatever you built, I don't know.
Well, what it comes down to is a quote from Crazy Horse. Crazy Horse, he was asked where his land was in jest and beat, right?
Say
So
that again because you broke up just a little bit.
where's your land at? Kind of in jest. And he said it's behind me where my people are buried at. So what happened is they built these big monuments cut into this KKK guy was brought in, and they built these monuments that look wonderful. They're beautiful and everything. But what they do is they are overlooking those graveyards. That's why it's insulting to the indigenous people.
Okay, yeah.
So,
Dude, like, yeah, if you want to talk about people that got screwed, like the indigenous, like again, that we can do a whole nother podcast on that. And
well, there's a lot to talk about.
there is a lot to talk about. Like Patrick, it's like it's crazy that it's already been like what half an hour. Yeah, so we've definitely had a good conversation, man. And I'd like to say again, thank you for coming on the show, We the People. Um, and also still putting it out there. Like again, I did not know about like how Activate Media came from Occupy Wall Street, and that's again, like I said, Happy 4th of July. Like that literally is we the people going on the street and protesting and taking, saying it's a government by the people, for the people, and of the people, and not corporations. And this whole whatever United U.S. They called the Supreme Court decision United Citizens United.
Oh, Citizens United,
Yeah, yeah,
yes.
yeah. Like,
You know what? Let me give. Can I give a little tip, since we're talking about we ed the people or read
yeah,
the people?
yes.
What I'd like to give everybody a little homework assignment, because you're really gonna like what you find, or you're not gonna like, but it'll be very it'll help you grow your conversation things. If you are angry or upset with Citizens United, you have to look back a little bit further. I think it's like 1973 or 4. during the Nixon administration. There was a case, and it was called Buckley versus Valeo, Valeo. Now, this case is what allowed the floodgates to open, so that things like Citizens United could be done. So go back and take a look at it. It's interesting because if you look at all these things that have happened along the way, they're all done legislatively with
Mm-hmm.
little pieces that tend to all fit together in a bigger way later on, and we're all going, "Hey, what happened?"
Mm-hmm. Animal Farm, baby.
Mhm.
That's literally it, baby. Animal Farm. That's what it, started one way, but just through to little steps, to little rule changes, they went right back to what they said they were fighting against. Anyway, we got just remember, folks. Get more organized, GMO, or ban GMOs. Either way, that's what we're spreading love here. I'd like to give a shout out again to Herb for being the producer debonair that he is, and Gallery Studios for hosting us, and Activate Media for coming on. Patrick Wilson, you've been wonderful. Again, I'd love to have you on again. Let's just keep in touch. And so this was great. Um, and then so you stay on the line anyway. We probably gonna chit chat, but I think we're gonna
Right
um
on.
again, just remember it's we the people, and then this is like us getting the word out to the people. It's like, it's for the people, by the people, and of the people. So yes to the people. All right.
Right on. Thanks for having me on, Rhodes.
You're very welcome. Thank you for coming on, man.